Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
That guy is still beating up on us. Let me try that again. Beating up on us. It's Monday. I can't talk.
Well, he heard that we were considering this job from St. Louis Public Radio, where we could read a couple minutes of news every day.
And now,
but you don't check enough diversity boxes, Brad.
Yeah, I do. I'm an old white guy, right? No, actually, I'm not. I'm what? I got it in the other studio. I'm a coffee mocha or mocha java. That's what I am. I'm a mocha java.
Yeah. It's. Hey, do you know what I say? Just ask Sherwin-Williams.
Okay, now.
Just ask Sherwin-Williams.
Let me see if I can find this. I didn't do my homework. I had to go in the other studio and do something real quick. Doctor, I'm going to she can find this real quick. Doctor who
disproved ulcer theory.
There you go. Disproved. Because I can't remember the guy's name. He's still alive.
And see, I always thought when I hear ulcers, I think stress. I do think spicy food, but I also think alcohol.
No.
Like was that also supposed to be a
well,
contributor?
Yeah, that was Barry Marshall, okay? Here he is. Matter of fact, there's all sorts of articles about him, Barry Marshall, and essentially, matter of fact, here's a NPR article from 2005. Here we go. And this is interesting. I forgot about this. The guy's name is, for decades it was believed that stress and poor eating habits caused ulcers. Now the Nobel Prize for Medicine has gone to the researchers who proved that ulcers are caused by a bacterium. What else do we know that isn't really so? And this is
interesting.
This is Scott Simon. You know Scott Simon. Like millions of other people, my father had an ulcer. In fact, he was considered a textbook case. My father was told he had to expect to have an ulcer because he had so much stress. He suffered stress from his divorce and stress from drinking. He had stress from his work and even more stress from not working. He had stress because he couldn't sleep because of his ulcer, and he had an ulcer because he had stress. He would stay up until the wee hours watching old Japanese science fiction films on Channel 9, holding his stomach and going, oh. My father packed his pockets with small white tablets. I think they were called amphetazoles. He'd pop compulsively. Okay, long story made, and here we go down. Ulcers caused a lot of people pain. A lot of people a lot of pain. This week, doctors Barry Marshall and Robin Warren of Australia won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for establishing that ulcers are caused by bacteria, not stress. Wow. Antibiotics can now banish most ulcers within a few weeks. The doctors remembered this week that other scientists were dismissive when they began their research in the early 1980s. People said, don't waste your time. Everybody knows that stress causes ulcers. Dr. Marshall told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It was like saying the earth is round. In 1984, Dr. Marshall mixed himself. This is the thing. This is the bizarre thing. Everybody said, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Let me read this paragraph now. In 1984, Dr. Marshall mixed himself a noxious cocktail containing ulcer bacteria to prove their theory. And where did he get the ulcer bacteria? He got it from one of his patients.
That's disgusting.
He took it out of one of his patient's stomach and drank it. I swear this is a true story. I'm not making this up. He says it didn't seem right to inflict the violent symptoms of an ulcer, which are too messy to recount here, on graduate students who are often volunteers in medical experiments because the idea that ulcers were caused by bacteria seems so wild. But Doctors Warren and Marshall turned out to be so right, they made their own specialty almost antique. You can't study ulcers in Australia anymore, says Dr. Warren, because everyone who has one has been cured. This, to me, and see, once again, remember, Dr. Fauci, you have to trust the science. You have to trust the science. Yeah. The science was that if you were Rock Hudson, or you were, like, for example, Scott Simon's father, who had a stressful job, had a stressful life, had a stressful divorce, had stressful kids. Oh, that's why he's got an ulcer. It's this stupid bacteria, and that's why to the point where, if for the most part, and I should call my doctor, Dr. Weichert, who would be great to go on the air, but I won't bother him this time in the morning. if I would call him right now, he would tell me that, just like it says in the article, if they diagnose you with ulcers, he gets your prescription, couple 2-3 weeks, gone. You know, I mean, it's gone.
That's amazing, yeah. But think of how many things in life that we just take for granted because it was conventional wisdom and we never question it.
But the problem is, and this is what bothers me, is that most of us, I don't want to say are lemmings, but we're
we are. We're sheep, right?
Right. Matter of fact, one of my old bosses used to talk about how, as a radio station, we have to learn how to herd the sheep. And the idea being was that it was our job to essentially, hey, don't you think Olivia Newton-John's great? Yeah, she's great. And we're like, oh, yeah, I love Olivia Newton-John.
Even though her songs were atrocious.
Well,
even though her music was an atrocity. It was a crime against humanity.
I liked Olivia Newton-John, to tell you the truth.
I like to look at her. I mean, she's like a lot. Well, anyway, I would watch her on mute. You know what I'm saying?
You really didn't like her songs?
No. What was her main song that she sang?
Well, she had a bunch of them. Probably the ones that everybody remember her, when she was doing the duets with John Travolta from Grease.
Well, yeah, but I mean, beyond Grease, she had a couple songs that I just thought weren't very good. She had Physical, right?
Yeah, well, that was the one that brought in the with the leg warmers and what is it?
Yeah. Now, truth be told, I liked both that song and that video. That's one of the first songs I remember.
Well, but see, once again, and it's funny we bring that one up because she herded the sheep. When Olivia Newton-John did the Physical thing, what happened to gyms? Women showed up. Hey, I mean, I'm not saying
Vic Tanny went through the roof.
Right. I'm not saying women weren't there to begin with, but more women showed up at gyms. And what did they show up? They showed up in the leg warmers. Didn't she have the headband? Wasn't the deal?
Yeah, she did have a headband.
Let me look at that real quick. Let me look at the Physical.
I mean, she's a little thin for my taste. But, she was still a good-looking woman. When you go back to the Fauci example, though, I think a lot of it is just when we talk about sheeps or lemmings, if you're in that category, think of the men that you know that get led around by their wife or their girlfriend or whoever. It absolves them of all decision-making responsibility. So if you just say, hey, trust the science, that means that all you have to do is listen to Fauci, and you don't have to take any responsibility for your own decisions.
But see, the problem nowadays is if there was ever a time when you and I have untold knowledge available at our fingertips via our laptop, our desktop, our smartphone. Yeah, there she is. She's got the headband on, and I didn't realize this. The video starts out with a dude. Do you know this?
Yeah, I know. Now, you know what? That would never work today. Because
shocking.
Guys like you and I would see the first few seconds, and we would click away, and we didn't know that Olivia would be coming. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, this is all guys. It shows a guy on one of those machines that that vibrates you, and the guy's butt cheeks are bouncing around.
That's disgusting. That's appalling.
Oh my God! I forgot about this.
Yeah, that's one of the first videos I ever remember seeing.
Boy, she is an attractive woman. Okay,
yeah,
so
boy, she was, wasn't she?
Okay, going back to what you said is the thing with like Fauci, and once again, Agnes, I'm sorry. I don't mean
She's the smartest woman in the world.
She's the smartest woman in the world, and she is like the number one Dr. Fauci, fan club member. Okay, and once again, I'm thinking to myself, if you follow, and she would get so mad at me, going back to the BS.show days, because if you remember this, in January of 2020, he was interviewed on 60 Minutes. I can't remember the guy who interviewed him. And what did he say on 60 Minutes? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't remember that interview. So that was immediately pre-quote pandemic, right?
That was when things were getting funky, because...
Yeah, and when strange symptoms and everything, in the West Coast especially. Go ahead.
December of 2019 is when things started going, people go, oh, we may have a problem here.
Yeah.
There's this virus coming, and it's nasty. He was on 60 Minutes, and not once but twice, he said that masks don't work. They don't. Matter of fact, if I were in the other studio, I could hit two buttons, and I could play the one. And it was funny because Agnes would get so mad every time. I can't believe you keep playing that. You're making fun of Dr. Fauci. I go, this is what he said.
Yeah. Now, wouldn't an Agnes? I guess Agnes's argument would be that the data changed, and leaders change based on new data.
Well,
Is that her point or not?
I remember reading an interesting article, and the article was, if you're going to pick a doctor, who do you pick? Do you pick a seasoned doctor who's been practicing for 20 or 30 years, or do you pick a young doctor who's a year or two out of medical school or out of their residency? In other words, they're done with their education. They're officially a full-blown MD, and they can go out and hang their shingle anywhere. Which one do you choose? Which one would you choose? A seasoned medical pro who's been doing it for 20 or 30 years, or a newbie who's, essentially...
I would pick the seasoned pro.
And they said that's wrong. Every time.
You should pick the person that's more recent and has new ideas about whatever.
Exactly, and they have
because the old doctor has confirmation bias.
Right, and they have all the new cures and all the new procedures and all the new
The
medicines.
newest and they went through in medical school. They went through the newest theories of medicine or whatever.
Right, and I know that's sort of counterintuitive because you go like, if you got to do plumbing, do you want your brother-in-law who has a
who
torch?
just watched a YouTube video on it,
or do you want some guy who's been sweating pipes for 30 years? You want the guy who's sweating pipes, but maybe not. Maybe your brother-in-law is really good at. Maybe he's practiced really well with his Bernzomatic map torch in his basement. Hey, I can solder real well. Let me sweat those joints for you. But see, that's the interesting thing. And the thing about it is that when you get into, sometimes I find this fascinating that when you get into an industry and everybody is, like perfect example. Let's use the car industry. We're going to talk about Elon Musk, okay? If you can go back and you can find this on YouTube. God, I love YouTube. You can find the day that Elon Musk showed up at Wall Street with his and if you know the whole story with Elon Musk, the original Tesla cars he built were the Tesla Roadsters, which were like little two-seater sports cars. And there's a video of him standing outside on Wall Street, New York City, being interviewed by a woman, and I don't know if she was with CNBC or where she was. She's one of the business channels. And she can start to tell she's being a little bit like, yeah, right, who's this guy? Electric cars, yeah, that's not going to work. We like big V8s, that kind of stuff. And he's a disruptor. And he's disrupted the automotive industry. Now, the problem is, if you followed this recently, I heard this over the weekend. If you look at the, you're a big stock guy, okay? All the Q4 stuff's coming out right now, right? All the year-end earnings reports and stuff like that. Okay, did you hear Ford how much money they lost on EVs?
Yeah,
it was like five.
And by the way, and I saw this morning too. Another EV maker has gone bankrupt. A company called Arrival. You're probably familiar with them.
Oh yeah. Well.
But I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Ford has lost like $5 billion on EVs now, and the crazy part of this is that to this day, if you go buy one of the Ford Lightning pickup trucks, which is the F-150 truck, and it's all electric, they lose between $30,000 and $40,000 every one they sell. So that would be like
incredible.
That would be like you being in the cookie business and going to buy all the ingredients, and you figure out, okay, each cookie costs me $2, and you sell them for $1. Pretty soon you're going to go like, I don't know if I can sustain this very much longer.
Yeah.
And not only that, the interesting thing is that all the EV manufacturers who are getting grief because they said this, and we're talking the big three, Chrysler or whatever this, Stellantis, and GM and Ford are all reevaluating their plans for the future, and meaning that they're going like, maybe we're not going to go whole hog into this EV thing. Now, the crazy part of this is, as opposed to states like California, didn't Maine just do this essentially where they said all cars in Maine have to be...
You have to have... I don't mean to jump your story here, but you have to have government intervention here or else it doesn't make sense.
Right. There's an interesting story I read just the other day about, I can't remember what city it is. I should take better notes on this. What city was, and they were deciding, we're going to go electric with our buses. And they bought 6 of these electric buses. And 6 of the electric buses sit in their shop now because the company that built them went out of business. They can't get parts anymore. And the maintenance costs, and these are relatively new buses, the maintenance costs are through the ceiling. And they can't even afford to run them anymore because they're broke. They can't get the parts. And even if they could get the parts, they're going like, maybe we should just cut our losses and just junk the things and buy new ones. Remember for a while, who was the person in the Department of Defense who was saying, or one of the congressmen, was it Claire McCaskill that said this when she's still in? Or she made the comment about that we need electric tanks?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember
this?
Was.
And,
and why not? And why not?
And people are thinking, I mean, anybody who's been in the military, if my dad were still alive, my dad would just fall off his chair, because of the fact that the whole logistics of that is like, okay, so let's take World War II for an example. As we're charging through, as we land on Omaha Beach, and we're essentially, heading toward Germany through France, and we've got the Germans on the run. Hey, hold on a minute. We got to take the tanks back. We got to charge the tanks. I mean, it's to the point.
What I love is, and for example, and I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but it was news in Missouri 2 or 3 weeks ago, is that the EPA has granted some Missouri school districts electric buses, and they cost almost $400,000, Brad.
They're super expensive.
And the charging stations are covered by the grants, but if I recall, they're somewhere between like $10,000 and $30,000 for a charging station.
Right. Okay. I'll give you one that I heard the other day. And once again, I should take notes on this because I hear all this kind of stuff, and I thought that's an interesting fact. There's been a study that came out that studied the guardrails on our highway. And the guardrails are designed to withstand the impact of an average-sized vehicle. They're saying that since the electric vehicles, way more because they have a big old massive battery, and since their center of gravity is so much lower because the majority of the weight is underneath the car because that's where the battery pack is, that the guardrails are not substantial enough for EVs hitting them.
No.
And you're going like, okay, here we go, the law of unintended consequences. Let's say it's 10 years from now and everybody's driving electric vehicles, which is not going to happen. But let's say, for theory, that it happened. The states would go like, federal, we need money to replace our guardrails.
That's exactly. You know what? It sounds like there should be another federal payment program to the states. That's what it sounds like to me, Brad.
Right. Okay. Here's, and here we have Josh Hawley saying, we need the government to provide money for new guardrails on the interstate. I'm going like, okay, whatever. There's a guy on, I mean, all this weird stuff that I pick up. My mind's full of mush and things that don't make anything. There's a guy who is on YouTube, and he does quite a bit of this. And the backstory is his daughter was killed in a car accident where she hit a guardrail that was improperly installed. If you know the whole thing, there's a whole theory on back in the day they used to bury the guardrails so it was like a ramp, and the problem was they figured out, and like, for example, my dad was a civil engineer, and my dad was against this because at the time he was the civil engineer for the SIU Uddersville, and I worked for the police department, and there were a couple of the police departments, cops who were like, we need buried guardrails. Well, the problem with that was that they started burying the guardrails, and it turned out that caused more fatalities because people would run off the highway and they would hit the buried guardrail and they would launch into the air and essentially, they would, like, let's say, hit another car, or the car would, go airborne like a daredevil kind of car, and would usually flip over, and, the people were killed by the impact. If you see what they do in the interstates now, they have these crash absorbing ends of the guardrail. And what's interesting is the way they're built is when you hit that guardrail and you see after they've been hit, what it does is it rapidly decelerates the vehicle, but it stops the vehicles. In other words, the vehicle isn't flying through the air and hitting other cars and ejecting people out of the cars and stuff like that. Well, anyway, this guy drives around the country and he inspects guardrails and shows you how most of them are improperly installed.
Wow.
And he has a video. Now, so this bolt right here, this bolt's wrong, and this should be backwards. And I'm going like, holy cow. I mean, once again, here we go again. They install these expensive guardrail systems, these energy-absorbing guardrail systems, and they install them wrong.
It almost sounds almost as captivating as the guy that goes to Six Flags and checks out the welds, Brad, that you taught us about.
I told you that story.
That's a great story.
Only nerds like...
I haven't watched any of them.
Only nerds like me appreciate crap like that. I'm telling you. Okay, we have to move on. People are going to wonder, what's this show about? You know what I'm saying?
Hey, it's like you and Shelley always said about your show. It's about nothing. Hey, at least we have structure here, though, Brad.
Yeah, but John,
we start with, and that's not a knock against the BS show, but we know that every morning we're going to start with 3 Missouri stories. That's some structure.
John, sometimes I feel like I'm ruining you. I really feel like I'm like I'm like the guy who says, "Hey, John, come over here. Look what I got. Ooh, these little things you can smoke. They'll make you feel good."
Hey, the first radio show's free in the National after that, I'm going to have
Right.
to
Yeah.
I'm going to charge you an hour a day.
Right, then I got to pay. You got to pay me.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?